I hired a cleaning lady to clean the house while I went off to enjoy my vacation. But 1 hour later, she called me, scared, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Alma, is there anyone else in your house besides me?" I felt my body go cold and pulled the car over to the shoulder. "What? No, there's no one. Why?" Her voice sounded even lower. "There is a woman walking upstairs." A chill ran down my spine. "What? Chloe, that's not possible. I live alone. Get out of that house immediately. Call the police." But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments. Where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories are reaching. My name is Alma, and 6 months ago, my life changed completely. It all started on a random Wednesday. I had finally managed to get a week off after 3 years of nonstop work at the advertising agency. I planned a trip to my friend Elaine's beach house, which was about 2 hours from New York City. I desperately needed that break, away from the apartment I barely saw in the daylight and the computer that consumed my nights. The morning of the trip, I looked at my apartment and felt ashamed. There was dust in every corner, dishes in the sink, and clothes scattered around the room. I decided I couldn't come back to that mess after days of relaxing by the ocean. I remembered Chloe, a woman who had given me her card at the supermarket, offering cleaning services. I found the number in my wallet and called her. "Hello, Chloe. This is Alma from the Bayview building. Could you do a cleaning in my apartment today?" She hesitated for a moment, but accepted when I mentioned I would pay an extra amount for the urgency. We agreed that she would arrive around 2 in the afternoon and that I would leave the key with the doorman. I explained that the apartment was 2 stories with the bedrooms upstairs, and I asked her to clean everything. Chloe had a calm and kind voice that gave me confidence. I left at 11 o'clock in the morning, anxious for my first real break in years. The drive toward the Hamptons was peaceful, and my mind was already starting to disconnect from work and worries. The sky was clear, the radio was playing my favorite songs, and I was singing at the top of my lungs, feeling free for the first time in a long time. I had been on the road for approximately 1 hour when my cell phone rang. I saw Chloe's number on the screen and answered, thinking she might need some additional information about the apartment. "Hello, Chloe? Is everything okay?" Silence. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then I heard a fast, shallow breath, almost a gasp. "Mrs. Alma," she whispered so low that I had to press the phone against my ear. "Oh, is there anyone else in your house besides me?" My body instantly froze. I slowed down and parked the car on the shoulder. "What? No, there's no one." "Why?" Her voice came out even lower, trembling. "There is a woman walking upstairs." A chill ran down my back. "What?" "Chloe, that's not possible. I live alone. There's no one there." "I saw her, ma'am. She's wearing a dark blue dress and was standing in the hallway looking at me. When I went up the stairs to clean the bedrooms, she turned around and went into the main bedroom." My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Chloe, get out of that house now. Leave immediately and call the police. I'm coming back." I made a sharp U-turn and stepped on the gas pedal. My hands were shaking as I dialed the police. I explained the situation, trying to remain calm, but my voice failed. I tried calling Chloe again, but she didn't answer. Every unanswered ring increased my desperation. I reached my building in record time. There was a police car parked in front, and 2 officers were talking to the doorman. My stomach sank when I didn't see Chloe anywhere. I parked haphazardly and ran toward them. "I'm Alma, owner of apartment 702. Where is Chloe? Is she okay?" One of the officers, a tall, middle-aged man, turned toward me. "Mrs. Alma, I'm Sergeant Anderson. We did a complete check of your apartment. We didn't find anyone inside." "And Chloe? Where is she?" "Ms. Chloe is sitting in the reception area." He pointed inside the building. "She's quite distressed." I ran inside and saw Chloe sitting in one of the lobby chairs, pale and shaking. When she saw me, her eyes widened. "Ma'am, I swear I saw someone. I'm not crazy. There was a woman up there." I sat next to her and took her hands. They were ice cold. "It's okay, Chloe. The police checked, and they didn't find anyone. Maybe it was a reflection or—" She shook her head vehemently. "I saw her clearly. She stared at me. She had empty eyes." Sergeant Anderson approached. "Mrs. Alma, we'd like you to check if anything is missing from the apartment. We went up together. My apartment door was open, with another officer standing at the entrance. Upon entering, I didn't notice anything different. Everything was exactly as I had left it. The mess intact, no sign of forced entry. I did a complete walkthrough with the police. Nothing was missing. No sign of an invasion. No forced windows. "It was probably just a scare," the sergeant commented as we prepared to go down. "Perhaps a reflection in the mirror or—" It was then that I noticed it. In the main bedroom, on my dresser, a picture frame was turned face down. I am sure I had left it standing up, with the photo of my family looking toward the bed. I picked up the object with trembling hands and turned it over. The glass was shattered, forming a crack that cut exactly across the face of the woman next to me in the photo. My mother. My first instinct was to show the picture frame to the sergeant, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the fear of sounding paranoid, or maybe it was intuition telling me that this went beyond a simple break-in. I put the object back on the dresser, now in the correct position, trying to ignore the chill running down my spine. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" the sergeant asked, noticing my hesitation. "Yes, everything is in order," I replied, forcing a smile. It must have been a mistake. The police asked a few more routine questions and finally left, leaving me with the recommendation to change the locks as a precaution. Chloe, still visibly shaken, refused to stay and finish the cleaning, even when I insisted on remaining in the apartment while she worked. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Alma, but I can't go back upstairs. That woman, there was something wrong with her." I paid her $150 for the time she had been there, and we said goodbye. I was left alone in my apartment, standing in the middle of the living room, unable to move. The trip to the Hamptons was obviously canceled. How could I relax now? My sanctuary, my refuge, had been invaded by something I couldn't explain. I tried to be rational, review the possible explanations. Maybe Chloe had seen her own reflection in a mirror or glass, or maybe she had imagined something due to exhaustion. But why was the picture frame flipped? Why was the glass shattered exactly over my mother's face? Night arrived, and with it, a fear I hadn't felt since I was a child. Every creak of the building's old walls made me jump. The staircase leading to the second floor seemed longer and darker than ever. I tried calling Elaine to tell her what happened, but she didn't answer. She was probably already at the beach house, out of range. Reluctantly, I went up to my room when the clock struck 11 o'clock in the evening. I couldn't force myself to sleep in the main bedroom, so I grabbed a pillow and blankets and settled in the guest room. Although I was exhausted, sleep wouldn't come. My eyes were fixed on the door, waiting for the handle to turn at any moment. It was then that I heard the first sound, a faint, dragging sound coming from the hallway, as if someone were sliding their feet across the wooden floor. I froze under the covers, my heart hammering in my chest. The sound stopped in front of the room door. I held my breath. Silence. Long minutes passed without anything happening. I started to convince myself that I had imagined everything when I heard a sigh, low, almost inaudible, but definitely real. A feminine sigh, laden with deep sadness. I gathered all my courage and got up. If there was someone in my house, I needed to know. With trembling hands, I grabbed my cell phone to use as a flashlight, and in a burst of bravery I didn't know I possessed, I opened the door. The hallway was empty and dark. I illuminated every corner with the phone's light. Nothing. I walked slowly to the main bedroom. The door was ajar, exactly as I had left it. I pushed it open slowly. The picture frame was flipped face down again. I ran out of the apartment, slamming the door behind me. I spent the night on the couch in the building's common area, unable to go back inside. In the morning, the doorman found me huddled, with deep, dark circles under my eyes, and shivering from the cold. "Mrs. Alma, is everything all right?" "Jerry, you know this building well, don't you? How long have you been working here?" "Almost 15 years, ma'am." "Can you tell me if anything happened in my apartment before I moved in? Anything strange?" He looked away, suddenly interested in his own shoes. "Why do you ask that, ma'am?" "Please, Jerry, I need to know." He sighed deeply, as if deciding whether to speak or not. "You know this building is more than 40 years old, right? A lot of stories have happened here." "And about 702, my apartment?" Jerry looked around, making sure we were alone. There was a case, yes, before the 2010 remodel. The former tenant, At that moment, one of the residents came down the elevator, interrupting our conversation. Jerry quickly changed the subject, talking about the weather and how the forecast called for rain for the weekend. When the neighbor walked away, Jerry leaned toward me. "Mrs. Alma, if you really want to know more, you should talk to Mrs. Jean in 305. She's lived here since the building opened. She knew the previous owner of your apartment." I thanked him for the information and went up to the third floor. I was tired, scared, but determined to understand what was happening. I rang the doorbell of 305, and after a few moments, a woman of approximately 80 years old opened the door. She had perfectly styled white hair and penetrating blue eyes that seemed to see beyond me. "Good morning," I began, a little nervous. "I'm Alma, from 702. Jerry the doorman suggested I talk to you about the history of my apartment." Mrs. Jean studied me for a few moments, as if evaluating my capacity to hear what she had to say. Finally, she opened the door wider. "Come in, dear. I think it's time you met Isabelle." I entered the impeccably tidy apartment. Mrs. Jean led me to a small living room decorated with well-preserved antique furniture. On the walls, dozens of photographs in silver frames. She gestured toward the armchair and went to a shelf, from which she took a carved wooden box. "What happened to make you come looking for me?" she asked as she sat beside me. I told her about the incident with Chloe, the woman in the blue dress, the sounds in the hallway, and the flipped picture frame with the shattered glass. Mrs. Jean listened attentively, showing no surprise. When I finished, she opened the box and took out an old photograph, yellowed with time. In it, a beautiful young woman smiled at the camera. She was wearing a dark blue dress and was standing on the staircase that I recognized as the lobby of my building. "This is Isabelle," Mrs. Jean said, her gentle voice loaded with memories. "Isabelle Miller, she was the first owner of your apartment. And yes, she died right there, exactly 30 years ago." Mrs. Jean's revelation hit me like a punch to the stomach. I kept staring at the photograph, unable to look away from Isabelle's smiling face. There was something familiar about her, something I couldn't identify, but that provoked a deep uneasiness. How did she die?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mrs. Jean put the photograph back in the box with an almost reverential delicacy. "The official version is that it was suicide. They found her in the main bedroom from an overdose of medication, but there were always rumors." "What kind of rumors?" "Isabelle was a brilliant woman, a university literature professor, a writer, full of life. It didn't fit the image of someone who would take their own life." Mrs. Jean paused, as if organizing her thoughts. She had recently married a man named Howard, a charming guy according to everyone who knew him, but there was something about him, something that didn't seem right to me. Mrs. Jean got up and walked to the window, looking down at the street. "A few months before her death, Isabelle started to change. She became quieter, more isolated. We rarely saw her leave the apartment. Howard said she was working on an important book and needed concentration. But one afternoon, I found her in the elevator. She was pale, thin, with deep dark circles under her eyes. When I asked if everything was all right, she gripped my hand so hard it left marks. 'He is not who he says he is,' was what she whispered to me." Mrs. Jean turned toward me, her eyes now moist. Before I could ask more, Howard appeared in the lobby, and she immediately composed herself, going back to being that silent and obedient wife. It was the last time I saw her alive. A chill ran down my spine. "And what happened to Howard after her death?" "He disappeared. He sold the apartment for a pittance, and he was never seen again. The police even investigated, but there was no evidence of a crime. Officially, Isabelle took her own life while suffering from depression." I tried to process all of that. A woman dead 30 years ago, wearing the same blue dress that Chloe described, appearing in my apartment, and the broken picture frame with my mother's photo. "There's one more thing you should know," Mrs. Jean continued, opening the box again. This time she pulled out a yellowed newspaper clipping. It was a small note about Isabelle's passing, with a photograph of her at an academic event. Next to her, a woman who sent a chill through me. "This is..." Your mother, isn't it? Julia Green. She and Isabelle were great friends in college. She was the one who found the body." The revelation hit me like a bolt of lightning. My mother had never mentioned Isabelle or any connection to my apartment. Why would she hide something like that? And why would Isabelle's spirit be breaking her photo? I thanked Mrs. Jean and went back to my apartment, my mind a whirlwind. The story of Isabelle and her mysterious death, the connection with my mother, everything seemed to be connected in a way I didn't yet understand. I cautiously entered the apartment. The daylight made the atmosphere less frightening, but I still felt a presence, as if the air itself was heavy with secrets. I went straight to the main bedroom and picked up the broken picture frame. I looked at my mother's face, trying to imagine what she had witnessed in that very room 3 decades ago. My mother had passed away 5 years ago, a victim of aggressive cancer. In the last days of her life, when the morphine left her confused, she frequently murmured disjointed phrases about telling the truth and forgiveness. At the time, I attributed it to the medication's delirium. Now I wasn't so sure. I decided to call my father. Maybe he would know something about Isabelle and my mother's involvement in this story. "Dad, I need to ask you something. Did you know a woman named Isabelle Miller? A friend of Mom's?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Where did you hear that name?" he finally replied, his voice strangely tense. "It's a long story, but I'm living in the apartment where she lived, where she died." "What? You're in Isabelle's apartment?" His voice went up an octave, something that rarely happened with my always controlled father. "Alma, get out of there right now." "Dad, what's going on? What do you know about her?" "It's not a conversation to have over the phone. I'm coming there right now. Don't talk to anyone else about this." He hung up before I could protest. My father lived almost 3 hours away in a small town in upstate New York, where he moved after my mother's death. If he was willing to make that trip immediately, the matter was more serious than I imagined. The following hours were endless. I tried to work, answer emails, anything to distract my mind, but it was impossible. Isabelle's presence seemed to float over me, invisible but undeniably real. Sometimes I had the impression of seeing a movement out of the corner of my eye or of smelling a faint jasmine perfume that didn't belong to me. When the doorbell finally rang, I ran to the door. My father seemed to have aged 10 years since the last time I saw him. He was pale, with deep dark circles under his eyes, as if he hadn't slept in days. "Dad, what's going on? You're scaring me." He entered, looking around with apprehension. "It's exactly as I remember it," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "Had you been here before? Why did you never tell me?" He walked slowly through the apartment, as if every step were painful. He stopped at the foot of the stairs leading to the second floor. "Your mother and Isabelle were more than college friends, Alma. They were like sisters, inseparable." We sat in the living room, and my father began to tell a story that would forever change my perception of my own family. Isabelle was brilliant, talented, the type of person who lights up any room. Your mother adored her. They had plans to write books together, to travel the world. And then Isabelle met Howard. My father pronounced that name as if it were poison. At first he seemed perfect, charming, intelligent, attentive. Your mother and I were newlyweds at the time, and the 4 of us frequently went out together. But soon, things started to change. Howard was possessive, controlling. Isabelle started canceling engagements, distancing herself from friends. Your mother tried to intervene, but Isabelle always defended Howard. He paused, running his hand through his gray hair. Then one night, Isabelle called your mother. She was in a panic. She said she had discovered something terrible about Howard, something she couldn't say over the phone. She begged Julia to go to the apartment the next morning. Your mother promised she would go. My father looked directly at me, his eyes full of old pain. When your mother arrived, she found Isabelle dead in the main bedroom. It was officially ruled a suicide. But your mother, she never believed it. And you? What did you believe? I believed Howard killed Isabelle, and I believe he would have killed your mother too, if he had had the chance. My father's revelation floated in the air like a heavy, toxic cloud. I felt my body sink into the armchair, as if gravity had suddenly increased. All of it seemed too surreal. Ghosts, mysterious deaths, family secrets. but at the same time, it made strange sense. "Why did Mom never tell me this?" I asked, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. My father sighed, running his hand over his tired face. "She wanted to protect you. In the first years after Isabelle's death, your mother was obsessed with proving Howard was guilty. She collected evidence, talked to neighbors, pursued leads. She became almost obsessive." And what happened? Howard disappeared completely, as if he had evaporated. He sold the apartment, closed bank accounts, cut off all contacts. The police even opened a deeper investigation due to your mother's insistence, but with no body, no weapon, no confession. All they had was a woman with a history of depression and a lethal amount of medication in her blood. I got up, unable to stay seated. I walked to the window, watching the city outside, people living their normal lives, oblivious to the drama unfolding within the walls of my apartment. "And why did Mom stop investigating?" My father hesitated, and I realized we had reached the most sensitive point of the story. "Because Howard threatened her directly. One night, your mother received an unmarked letter. Inside, there was only a photograph of her holding you as a baby with a message on the back. 'I hope she lives longer than Isabelle.' An icy chill ran down my back. I turned to face my father, who now seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders. After that, she stopped. She put away all the evidence she had collected and never touched the subject again. Until what, Dad? Until the last days before her death. The morphine, the pain, I think that made her relive those moments. She started talking about Isabelle, about the hidden truth. She asked me to look for a blue velvet box at the back of her closet. And did you look for it?" He shook his head. "I thought it was just the delirium from the medication. And honestly, I didn't want to relive that period. It was the darkest time of our lives. After she passed away, I donated most of her things. The box must have gone with them." Something sparked in my memory. Wait, a blue velvet box? Small, with a gold clasp? My father's eyes widened. "Yes, exactly. How do you know?" "She gave me that box on my 25th birthday, shortly before she got sick. She said it was a family keepsake and that I should keep it with care." I felt my heart race. I ran to the guest room, where I had left the boxes I hadn't yet unpacked since the move. I frantically rummaged through the items until I found what I was looking for: a small, elegant, antique blue velvet box. I returned to the living room, where my father was waiting, visibly tense. I placed the box on the coffee table. "I never opened it," I confessed. "Mom said it was just a piece of family jewelry, nothing special, but that it had sentimental value for her. After she died, I didn't have the courage." My father tremblingly reached out and opened the box. Inside, there was no jewelry, but a silver flash drive and a small key, possibly for a safe deposit box or a locker. "This is not the type of thing your mother would normally keep," he said, taking the flash drive. "We need to see what's in here." We connected the device to my laptop. There was only one folder simply named I. Inside, dozens of files, photos, digitized documents, audio recordings. We started with the photos. Most showed Isabelle and my mother together in college, laughing at parties, studying in the library, walking on campus. In some, a man I presumed was Howard appeared. He was conventionally attractive, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The documents were more disturbing. Copies of Isabelle's autopsy report, witness statements, newspaper articles about the case, and something that chilled me: pages of what appeared to be a diary. "Those are pages from Isabelle's diary," my father confirmed, reading over my shoulder. "How did your mother get hold of this?" I opened one of the audio files. My mother's voice filled the room, methodical and professional as always. File 17. Interview with Steve Peterson, building doorman in 1993, May 12, 1995. An elderly, trembling male voice began to speak. "Yes, ma'am. I remember that night. Mr. Howard left the building around 11 o'clock in the evening. He seemed agitated, carrying a suitcase. He said he was going to look for medicine for his wife at the 24-hour pharmacy. I found it strange because he was wearing a heavy coat, despite it being a warm summer night. When he returned, almost 2 hours later, he wasn't carrying any medicine, and the coat looked more bulky. The next morning, The madam found Mrs. Isabelle. We listened to recording after recording, statements from neighbors who heard frequent arguments, from a domestic worker who saw bruises on Isabelle's arm, from a pharmacist who confirmed Howard had bought large quantities of controlled medication in the weeks leading up to Isabelle's death. "Your mother built an entire case against Howard," my father murmured, visibly affected. "Much more complete than I imagined." The last audio file was dated just a week before my mother's death. Her voice was weak, affected by the illness, but still determined. Final log. "After all these years, I finally found Howard. He changed his name, his appearance, built a new life. But it's him, I'm sure. The evidence is all here. If anything happens to me, I want you to know. Howard Flores is now William Smith. He lives in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and—" The recording cut off abruptly. My father and I looked at each other, stunned. "She found him," I whispered. "After all this time." A sudden noise startled us. Something had fallen upstairs. My father and I froze, exchanging looks of apprehension. "It must just be the wind," I murmured, without conviction. My father slowly got up. "I'll go check." "No, I'm coming with you," I insisted, grabbing my cell phone to use as a flashlight. We cautiously went up the stairs, each step creaking under our feet like a warning. The upstairs hallway was dark, despite it being mid-afternoon. The thick curtains blocked most of the natural light. We walked toward the main bedroom, where the noise seemed to have come from. The door was ajar. I gently pushed it, revealing the empty room. Everything seemed normal, except for one detail. All the picture frames on the dresser were turned face down, not just my mother's. "Someone was here," my father whispered, his voice trembling. I approached the dresser and noticed something I hadn't perceived before. Behind the picture frames, on the wall, there was a small crack. Or rather, it wasn't exactly a crack, but a fine, almost imperceptible line. "Dad, look at this," I called, running my fingers over the mark. He came closer, adjusting his glasses to see better. "It looks like a door." I pressed the wall around the line, and to our surprise, a small compartment opened, a built-in safe that I never would have imagined existed there. Inside, there was only one envelope, yellowed with time. My father took the envelope with trembling hands and opened it. Inside, a single folded sheet of paper and an old photograph. In the photo, Isabelle smiled, wearing the same dark blue dress, sitting on what looked like a park bench. Beside her, Howard hugged her around the waist. We flipped the photograph, and handwritten in elegant calligraphy were the words, "Forever yours, no matter what." The letter was short, handwritten in the same calligraphy. "Dear Julia, if you are reading this, it means my suspicions were correct. Howard is not who he says he is. I found documents in his study, another identity, records of a previous wife who disappeared under suspicious circumstances. He found out that I know, and I am afraid of what might happen. I am recording everything in a red diary, hidden under the loose floorboard near the bedroom window. If anything happens to me, you will know where to look. Forgive me for involving you in this. You were the best friend anyone could have. With love, Isabelle." I stood paralyzed, holding that piece of paper that represented Isabelle's last contact with the world. A letter my mother probably never saw, hidden in that secret safe. Who had put it there? Howard to hide evidence? Or Isabelle herself, knowing it would be too late? "The loose floorboard," my father said, looking at the room's floor. "We have to find it." We began to examine the wooden floor, tapping softly with our knuckles, listening for variations in the sound. Near the window, as Isabelle had described, one of the boards produced a different, more hollow sound. My father managed to lift it with some effort, revealing a small, dusty space. There was no diary. Someone was already here, I concluded, feeling a mix of disappointment and relief. A part of me wanted to discover the truth, but another part feared what that truth might reveal. "Your mother must have found it," my father suggested. "That's where all the evidence she collected must have come from." At that moment, we felt a cold draft pass through the room, even though all the windows were closed. The jasmine perfume I had smelled before intensified. It was as if Isabelle were there, invisible but present, accompanying our discovery. "She's trying to tell us something," I murmured, not caring if I sounded irrational. Her spirit is restless, incomplete. My father, always the pragmatic one, did not mock my suggestion as I expected. Instead, he slowly nodded. Julia would say the same thing. She always believed Isabelle wouldn't rest until the truth came out. We returned to the living room, where the laptop still showed the files my mother had collected. The key we found in the blue velvet box remained a mystery. It didn't fit any lock in the apartment, nor the safe we had discovered. "We need to find out what happened to Howard, or William," I said, determined. "Mom found him. We need to finish what she started." My father seemed hesitant. "Alma, this could be dangerous. If he really killed Isabelle, if he threatened your mother." "We are already involved, Dad. And Isabelle deserves justice, even if it's delayed." I spent the following hours reviewing the files my mother left behind, looking for any clue about Howard's new identity. The final recording mentioned Santa Fe, New Mexico, but the tourist city received thousands of visitors annually. Finding someone there, especially someone who didn't want to be found, would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. Until I came across a file we hadn't noticed before, hidden in a subfolder. It was a bank statement in the name of William Smith, with the address of a branch in Santa Fe, New Mexico. It wasn't much, but it was a start. "Are we going to Santa Fe?" my father asked, worried. "No," I replied, after a few moments of reflection. "We'll do something different. If Howard killed Isabelle, if he fled and built a new life, he certainly doesn't want his past to come to light. What would happen if we threatened to expose that past?" My father looked at me with concern. "Are you suggesting we contact a potential murderer?" "Alma, that's insane." "Not directly, but we could create a situation that forces him to reveal himself." I spent the night drawing up a plan. I created an anonymous post on an online platform mentioning that I was writing a book about the unsolved case of Isabelle Miller's death and that new evidence pointed to the involvement of her husband, Howard Flores, now living under the name of William Smith in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I included enough details to sound credible, but vague enough not to reveal everything we knew. My father watched with a mixture of admiration and fear. "You are as determined as your mother," he commented with a sad smile. "But I'm also worried you'll end up like her." "I'm not going to end up like her," I promised. "We are going to solve this together until the end." The next day, I received a notification that someone had commented on my post. It was a private message from an anonymous user. "You don't know what you're getting into. Isabelle committed suicide. Any other version is a lie. Stop while you still can." I showed the message to my father, who turned pale. "It's him. It has to be." "Exactly as we expected," I agreed, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. "Now we move to the next step." I replied to the message. "I have Isabelle's red diary. I want to talk." The answer came almost instantly. "You're lying." "I'm not. I know about Martha, the first wife. I know about the false documents. I know everything." There was a long pause before the next message. "Meet me tomorrow, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, at the Bluebird Cafe in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Come alone. No police, no tricks, or I never talk to you again." I showed the message to my father, who immediately protested. "I'm not going to let you meet that man alone. It's too dangerous." "I have no choice," I argued. "This may be our only chance to discover the truth, to get justice for Isabelle and for Mom." The trip to Santa Fe, New Mexico, the next morning was silent and tense. My father insisted on accompanying me, despite the warning from Howard, or William as he was now called, to come alone. We agreed that he would stay at a safe distance, observing the meeting without being seen. The Bluebird Cafe was on one of the busiest streets in the tourist city, surrounded by shops and restaurants full of visitors. A public place for such a dangerous meeting seemed a strange choice, but it also gave me a false sense of security. After all, who would try something in broad daylight with dozens of witnesses around? I arrived a half hour before the agreed time and chose a strategic table, from where I could see the entrance and the surrounding tables. I ordered a coffee that I couldn't drink, my stomach too tight with anxiety. In my 32 years of life, I had never felt so exposed and vulnerable. At 2 o'clock, 58 minutes in the afternoon, he walked in. I recognized him immediately, despite the changes. His hair, previously dark in the old photos, was now completely white. Deep wrinkles marked his face, but the eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, were the same ones that had observed me from the photographs with Isabelle. He walked straight to my table, without hesitation, as if he knew exactly who I was. He sat in front of me with a disturbing tranquility. "You're identical to your mother," was the first thing he said, his voice soft and controlled. "The same determination in your eyes, the same inability to leave the past in peace." I felt a chill run down my spine, hearing that voice mention my mother with such familiarity. I forced myself to maintain my posture, remembering the plan. "Mr. Smith? Or should I call you Mr. Flores?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. A cold smile formed on his lips. "William is fine. Howard Flores died a long time ago, along with Isabelle." "That's what I want to talk about how Isabelle really died." He studied me for a long moment, as if evaluating how dangerous I could be to him. "Isabelle took her own life. That's what the official records state. Any other version is pure speculation." "I have evidence that suggests otherwise. Ah, yes, the famous red diary." He laughed, a sound empty of humor. "You're lying, just like your mother lied for years. If that diary really existed, Isabelle would never have been declared a suicide. Your mother would have gotten the justice she sought so much." I kept my gaze fixed on his. "My mother found the diary, and other evidence. She just didn't have time to use it before she died of cancer," he completed, with a cruelty that made me swallow. Ironic fate, isn't it? So many years pursuing a ghost, and in the end, it was biology itself that took her. In that moment, I hated him more than I had ever hated anyone. The casual way he spoke of my mother's death, the disdain in his voice, everything confirmed my suspicions about what kind of man he really was. "Why did you kill her?" I asked directly, abandoning the game. "What did Isabelle discover that was so dangerous?" His smile disappeared, replaced by a hard, impenetrable expression. "Be careful what you say, girl. Accusations like that can have serious consequences." "I'm willing to risk it." "Just like your mother? You know she almost succeeded, don't you? It was close, but then, well, the disease was faster." He took a sip of the coffee he had ordered, his eyes never leaving mine. "Sad, isn't it? Investing decades in a lost cause, only to die before seeing any results." Something in his words deeply bothered me. The way he spoke of my mother's illness seemed loaded with an intimate knowledge he shouldn't have. "How did you know she was sick?" I asked, feeling a new kind of fear grow inside me. He realized his mistake, but quickly recovered. "News travels. Your mother tracked me. I also kept her under surveillance. Basic precaution." But I no longer believed him. A terrible suspicion began to form in my mind. Her cancer appeared suddenly, advanced stage when diagnosed. The doctors were surprised by the aggressiveness. Cancer is like that, unpredictable, or it wasn't cancer at all. He leaned forward, his face inches from mine. "Be careful with the path you are following, Alma. Some truths are too dangerous to be discovered." "You poisoned her," I whispered, the reality hitting me like a punch. "The same way you did with Isabelle, slowly, imperceptibly, making it look like a natural disease." William, Howard, leaned back in the chair, his expression now completely cold. "Prove it." At that moment, I felt a presence beside me. It wasn't my father, who should have been watching from afar. It was an elderly woman, gray hair pulled back in an elegant bun. I recognized her immediately, Mrs. Jean. "Hello, Howard," she said, her voice surprisingly firm for someone her age. Or should I say William? The man in front of me visibly paled, as if he had seen a ghost. "Jean? What are you doing here?" "I came to testify, as I should have 30 years ago." She placed a hand on my shoulder, comforting me. "We are not alone, Howard. We never were." It was then that I noticed other people had approached. My father, of course, but also a middle-aged man I didn't recognize, wearing a doorman's uniform, and an elderly lady holding a folder of documents. "Steve Peterson," the man introduced himself. "I was the doorman that night. I never forgot what I saw." "Dr. Hannah Smith," the lady said. "I was a forensic doctor for 40 years. Your mother sought me out before she died. I analyzed her hair samples. The arsenic levels were significant. Howard looked around like a cornered animal. "This is ridiculous. A setup. You have no proof of anything." "We have the diary," I asserted, lying one last time. "And we have something better. Living witnesses. People willing to talk. You won't escape this time." He abruptly stood up, knocking over the coffee cup. "This is not over," he threatened, before trying to rush out. But at the cafe exit, 2 police officers were waiting for him. My father had alerted the authorities, presenting the evidence my mother had collected, the recordings, the documents, the analyses, and now the final testimony of people who had kept silent out of fear for 3 decades. As the police handcuffed him, I felt a gentle breeze pass by me, carrying that same jasmine perfume. For an instant, perhaps a trick of the light, perhaps something more, I thought I saw a woman in a dark blue dress standing by the door, watching everything with a serene smile. I returned home that night with a feeling I couldn't fully define. It wasn't exactly peace, as there were still many unanswered questions. It wasn't exactly closure, as the pain of losing my mother was still too fresh. It was something deeper, more fundamental, the feeling that an old injustice was finally being righted. My father decided to stay with me for a few days. His presence was comforting, especially at night when the apartment noises seemed more intense, more significant. But curiously, I no longer felt fear. If Isabelle was still there, she was now a benevolent, perhaps even protective presence. The next night, I found my mother's picture frame turned right side up on the dresser, the glass miraculously intact without the crack that had shattered it. Beside it, a small bouquet of fresh jasmine flowers that I certainly hadn't put there. The days that followed Howard's arrest were an emotional roller coaster. The news spread quickly, rekindling interest in Isabelle's case. Reporters were constantly calling, wanting details on how we had managed to solve a 3-decade-old case. Prosecutors from the district attorney's office contacted us, eager to build a solid indictment. My father, Mrs. Jean, Steve, and Dr. Hannah gave formal statements. The evidence my mother had collected over the years, now complemented by toxicological exams on preserved hair samples, painted a devastating picture. Howard had gradually poisoned Isabelle, making it look like depression culminating in suicide. Years later, upon discovering that my mother was about to expose the truth, he did the same to her. The case became a national sensation. The women's poisoner, the newspapers now called him. Deeper investigations revealed that Isabelle had not been his first victim. Before her, there was Martha, his first wife who mysteriously disappeared on a trip to Europe. And after my mother, there was a girlfriend in Santa Fe, New Mexico, who died of natural causes just 2 years ago. A grim pattern of decades of manipulation and murder. In the midst of this turmoil, I found myself oscillating between different emotions. There was satisfaction, of course, for finally achieving justice for Isabelle and my mother. There was also rage, a deep rage that consumed me on sleepless nights, thinking about how my mother had been taken from me, not by a cruel disease, but by the calculated malice of a man she had faced alone for years. But there was also a strange sense of emptiness, as if, after all this frantic searching for answers, I didn't know what to do with them now that I had them. One afternoon, sitting in the living room with the evidence folders scattered on the table, material the prosecutors had temporarily returned to me so I could organize it better, I found something I hadn't noticed before. It was a handwritten note by my mother, dated 3 days before her death. "To my dear Alma, I hope you never need to read this, but if you are, it means I couldn't finish what I started. I pursued the truth about Isabelle for almost 30 years, not only because she deserved justice, but because I understood that evil left unchecked only grows and spreads. Howard is, a monster disguised as a man, and I cannot bear the idea of him remaining free to destroy more lives. If you are reading this, my daughter, it means he managed to silence me too. Don't blame yourself for not having realized. I hid everything from you deliberately to keep you safe. What I ask of you now is to make a conscious decision. You can continue this search, or you can choose to live your life in peace. Any choice will be the right one, as long as it is truly yours. Do not allow hatred and obsession to consume you as they almost consumed me. The truth is important, but your happiness is more. Regardless of what happens, you must know that I love you more than anything, and that in some way, Isabelle and I will always be watching over you. With all my love, Mom." The tears came without warning, intense and cathartic. I cried for my mother, for Isabelle, for all of Howard's victims. I cried for the truth that had arrived too late for so many people. But I cried mainly for myself, for the daughter who grew up without knowing, for the adult who now carried the weight of a legacy of pain and courage. That night, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened a bottle of wine, put on some music, and simply allowed myself to feel, not just the pain and rage, but also the relief, and surprisingly, a beginning of peace. As my mother had written, the truth was important, but my life was too. A knock on the door pulled me from my thoughts. It was Mrs. Jean, holding a small box in her hands. "May I come in, dear?" she asked in her gentle way. "I found something I think you should have." We sat in the living room, and she handed me the box. Inside was a small book bound in red leather, worn with time. "Isabelle's diary," I whispered, unable to believe what I was seeing. "But how?" Mrs. Jean smiled sadly. "Isabelle gave it to me the afternoon before she died. She said that if anything happened to her, I should keep it safe until it was safe to give it to Julia." "But why did you never give it to my mother?" "I tried, dear, but at the time, Howard was still nearby, watching. He threatened my family when he realized I knew too much. When I finally gathered the courage to look for your mother, years later, she was already too sick." I held the small book in my hands, feeling its weight. Not just physical, but historical, emotional. Isabelle's last words, her suspicions, her fears. A testimony that arrived too late to save her, too late to save my mother, but perhaps not too late for final justice. "Are you going to give it to the police?" Mrs. Jean asked. "Yes," I replied after a pause, "but first I'm going to read it. I owe it to them." When Mrs. Jean left, I carefully opened the diary. The handwriting was the same as the letter we had found, elegant but nervous, as if written in a hurry. I read the first entry. "Dear Diary, today I discovered something about Howard that left me in shock. While organizing his study, I found fake documents, a new identity being built. I also found newspaper clippings about the disappearance of his first wife, Martha, something he never mentioned. And even more disturbing, I found small vials of a substance I suspect is poison. I am afraid of what this means, afraid of what he might do if he discovers that I know. I have felt increasingly weak in recent months. Could it be the supplements he insists I take? I need to talk to Julia. She will know what to do. But I need to be careful, very careful. Isabelle." The last entry, dated the day of her death, was only one sentence. "He knows that I know." I closed the diary, feeling a chill. It was the final confirmation, the definitive proof that would seal Howard's fate. The next day, I would deliver that silent testimony to the district attorney's office. That night, I dreamed of my mother and Isabelle. They were together in a sunny garden, laughing as they did in the old college photos. In the dream, my mother turned to me and said, "That's it, daughter. We are free. You are too." I woke up with the first ray of sun and a calm certainty that an important stage of my life had been completed. The evil had been exposed, justice was underway, and now I had a decision to make, exactly as my mother had written. I took the diary and went to the district attorney's office. I delivered it personally, explaining its origin and importance. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, thanked me and said some words that would stay with me. "Your mother and Isabelle would be very proud. Not everyone would manage to close an unfinished story of 3 decades. Leaving the courthouse, I felt that same light breeze and the jasmine scent. I smiled at the blue autumn sky, knowing that, in some way, they were with me. They always would be. 6 months passed since the day Mrs. Jean gave me the red diary. Howard's, or Williams, as he still insisted on being called, trial was underway, a complex process that unearthed decades of lies and manipulation. His defense tried to invalidate the evidence, labeling the diary as fanciful and questioning the chain of custody of the evidence collected by my mother. but the puzzle was too complete to be undone now. The story acquired unexpected proportions. A documentary producer sought me out, interested in turning the case into a series. Journalists wanted exclusive interviews. Publishers offered book contracts. All that attention was disconcerting, but also an opportunity to ensure that no Isabelle or Julia was forgotten again. As for the apartment, well, I decided to sell it, not out of fear. Strangely, Isabelle's presence had become almost comforting in recent times. But because it was time for new beginnings, the story had reached its natural end, and I needed to write my own chapter. On the last day before the move, I went up to the main bedroom one last time. The room was empty now, only the wooden floor and the bare walls testifying to decades of secrets and pain. "Thank you," I said aloud to the empty room, "for finding me, for trusting me to finish this." A soft scent of jasmine filled the air, like a silent response. I smiled, knowing it would be the last time I would feel that presence. As I descended the stairs, I found Mrs. Jean waiting in the living room. She had become a close friend in recent months, a living link to the past that helped give meaning to the present. "So you're really leaving?" she asked, her gaze sweeping over the empty walls where my photographs once hung. "Yes, it's time to move on." "Where will you go?" "I'm not sure yet. Maybe travel a bit. Write the book about all this. See the world that my mother and Isabelle couldn't see." Mrs. Jean smiled, her eyes shining with a wisdom that only years can bring. "They would be proud of you, you know, not only for exposing the truth, but for choosing to live after this." I handed her a small package, a box containing the picture frame that had been broken and then mysteriously restored. "I want you to keep this, to remember them, and to remember us." She accepted the gift with tears in her eyes. "And to remember you, my dear, don't forget to visit us." I could never forget. The morning of the move, as I loaded the last box into the car, my phone rang. It was the prosecutor on the case. "Ms. Alma, I have news." Howard confessed. I stopped in the middle of the movement, incredulous. How? Why? The evidence was overwhelming. Isabelle's diary was the final point, the prosecutor explained. But there's more. During the interrogation, he confessed to other cases, other women we suspected, but didn't have concrete evidence. In total, 5 victims over 4 decades. I sat on the front step, my legs suddenly weak. My God. He's trying to negotiate a reduced sentence in exchange for information on where the remains of some of the victims whose bodies were never found are located. It's a significant breakthrough. And the confession about my mother? Did he admit it? There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. Yes, he described the process in detail, how he administered arsenic in small doses for months, how he planted the idea of a terminal illness in her head and in everyone else's around her. It was meticulous. I closed my eyes, feeling a confusing mixture of pain and relief. "Thank you for letting me know." "You deserved it, Alma. Without you, these women would never have had justice." After hanging up, I sat there for a few minutes, letting the information sink in. Howard had confessed. The man who destroyed so many lives would finally face the consequences of his actions. It didn't bring back my mother, or Isabelle, or the other victims, but it closed a cycle that seemed endless. My father arrived to help with the last boxes, and he found me still sitting on the steps. "Everything okay, daughter?" Howard confessed. "Everything." He sat beside me, putting his arm around my shoulders. We remained silent for a long time, sharing a pain that words could never fully express. "Your mother would be at peace now," he finally said. "She dedicated 1/2 of her life to this." "I know. I just wish she could have seen the end." Maybe she did in some way. I thought of the jasmine perfume, the restored photo, the small signs I had experienced in recent months. Would it be too strange to believe that, in some way, my mother and Isabelle had been present throughout this journey? That same afternoon, as I was organizing the last boxes in the car, a taxi stopped in front of the building. A young woman of approximately 20 years old got out, looking confusedly at the address on the paper in her hands. "Can I help you?" I asked, noticing her lost look. "I'm looking for Alma Green," she replied shyly. "That's me." The young woman seemed surprised. then nervous. "My name is Sophia Smith." "Smith? Are you a relative of Dr. Hannah?" "She was my grandmother," she replied, the use of the past tense alerting me that something had happened. "Was?" "She passed away last week, peacefully, in her sleep." I felt a knot in my chest. Dr. Hannah had been fundamental in proving my mother's poisoning. "I'm so sorry for your loss." "Thank you. Before she left, Grandma asked me to give you this. She said it was important." Sophia extended a sealed manila envelope. Inside, there were some sheets of paper and a small golden key. The sheets contained the final and conclusive report of my mother's hair analysis, with Dr. Hannah's official signature and a small attached note. "Dear Alma, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer here. Don't be sad. I lived a long and full life, and leaving at 86 years old is a privilege that many of the women involved in this case did not have. I want you to know that your mother was one of the bravest people I knew. When she sought me out, she was already very sick, but her determination to expose the truth never wavered. She knew she was being poisoned, but instead of seeking treatment for herself, which would likely be useless at that stage, she dedicated her last energies to collecting evidence that could one day incriminate her killer. The key I am sending belongs to a safe deposit box at National Bank, downtown branch. The number is on the back of this note. Inside, you will find more documents your mother left, including a letter for you that she asked me to keep. It was an honor to serve justice alongside Julia and then by your side. With affection, Hannah Smith." I thanked Sophia profusely and promised to keep in touch. After she left, I looked at the small key in my hands. One more link in this chain of women united by time, tragedy, and the tireless search for justice. The next day, before leaving the city definitively, I visited the bank. The safe deposit box contained a folder of meticulously organized documents, more evidence against Howard, some that I already knew, others completely new, and, as promised, a sealed letter addressed to me in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. I waited until I reached my new house to open it. It was a small rented apartment in a coastal city, a neutral place without painful memories, where I could start anew. I sat on the balcony overlooking the sea and finally opened the letter. "My beloved daughter, if you are reading this, it means two things. First, that I am no longer here to tell you this story personally, something that breaks my heart just to think about. And second, that in some way you discovered the truth about Isabelle, about Howard, and possibly about me. There are so many things I wish I could have told you in life, but the fear of putting you in danger was always greater than my desire to share this burden. Howard is, or was, a dangerous man, capable of waiting decades for revenge. The only way to protect you was by keeping you completely unaware of all this. When I discovered I was being poisoned, my first instinct was to protect you. I created the fiction of cancer because I knew that a natural disease would keep Howard away from you. He already had what he wanted, my silence guaranteed by imminent death. There would be no reason for him to turn against you as long as you knew nothing. But now, if you are reading this, it is because fate plotted another path. Something led you to discover this long-buried story. Maybe it was Isabelle in some way, guiding you. She was always stubborn like that. I don't know if I managed to gather enough evidence to incriminate Howard. I worked against the clock and my own physical limitations, but I hope that what I left behind is a start, a thread for you to follow, if you choose to. But my daughter, this is the most important part. You have no obligation to continue this search. You can choose to leave the past in the past and live your life fully, without the weight of this somber inheritance. That would also be an honorable and courageous choice. Whatever you have decided, you must know that I am proud of you. I always was. I hope you find the peace that Isabelle and I sought for so long. With all my love, today and always, your mother. Tears ran freely down my face as I finished reading. My mother, even on the brink of death, had thought of my protection first. She had created a meticulous plan not only to expose the truth, but to ensure that I could live safely. I put the letter against my chest and looked at the horizon, where the sky met the sea in an infinite line of possibilities. I had made my decision to follow the path of truth until the end, and now I was free to chart a new path. In the following months, I followed Howard's trial from a distance. The final sentence was severe: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The remains of 2 of his victims were found exactly where he had indicated, bringing some peace to the families who had waited decades for answers. I began writing a book about this entire story. Not a sensationalist account, but a tribute to the women who refused to allow the truth to be silenced. Isabelle, my mother, Mrs. Jean, Dr. Hannah, and all the others who, in some way, contributed to justice being done. One night, almost 1 year after leaving that apartment, I dreamed of my mother and Isabelle. They were together in a garden full of jasmine, talking animatedly as in the old college photographs. In the dream, both turned to me and smiled, not a sad farewell smile, but a radiant smile of liberation. I woke up with the tranquil certainty that finally they had found peace, and so had I. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was the mail carrier, delivering the first printed copies of my book, Whispers in the Walls, the story of Isabelle and Julia. I opened the volume with an almost reverential care and read the dedication I had written months before. To Isabelle and Julia, who never gave up on the truth. To all the silenced voices that still wait to be heard. And to you, reading these words, may you never underestimate the power of a woman determined to discover the truth, no matter how long it takes. Now, if you liked this story, click on subscribe and tell me in the comments what part left your jaw dropping. Oh, and don't forget to join as a member to get access to exclusive videos that I don't post here. I'll be waiting for you.